and welcome to the Ideal Spaces new interview series. I'm your host, Flora Loughridge, and today I'm joined by documentary and architecture photographer Filippo Romano. Welcome to the podcast.
Good afternoon.
I've been really looking forward to speaking to you about your work, Filippo, and particularly because our current research focus at Ideal Spaces is community and place. And I always think that photography is so important when you're exploring cities, architecture and urban dwellers, because the camera is able to capture those fleeting moments in urban spaces that could be so easily missed. And it's in those moments that we find the really interesting narratives and identities, I suppose, of a particular place, space, or the people who inhabit it. Now, you've travelled widely throughout your career, documenting urban development in China, the 2010 Haiti earthquake, and recently life in ghettos in Nairobi, to name just a few of your projects. But before we talk about those, I'd like to go back, retrace our steps to the very beginning of your career. You studied at the ISIA in Italy and went on to specialise in photo documentary at the ICP in New York. And I'm sure it's not the first time that you've been asked this question, but I wondered if you could tell me when the first time was that you discovered photography, and also whether your focus has always been cities and architecture.
Well, I started to use the camera when I was 16. It was a gift from my father. And I consider it since that moment a sort of the camera, I consider it as a sort of companion when I was traveling, and an instrument to record my traveling around. And it's really related to that. I love to travel. I was a teenager and I had a chance that my father was helping me. When I say traveling, I don't mean necessarily going in some weird places. Simply, I was going to Paris or to Europe, discovering the cities. I'm always been a city dweller since always, since I was able to go around. And that's my relationship with the camera. So it's sort of like a way of writing my travel experience. And then it has grown slowly but intensively, and I'm still a very active photographer. You've been mentioning the fact that I've been in many places, but I can tell you that the way I work is always trying to be exactly in the same mood, in the same spirit, in the same kind of attitude when I'm going around the corner of my house. It might sound strange, but that's the level of attention I have. Considering the fact that you can be absolutely absorbed on your mind when you go around and you do something that is very, how can I say, a practice of a daily life moment. But if you really concentrate on yourself, so camera is a way to make myself more concentrate on my life experience. It's really what I love to do. And every time I go to a new places, I try to understand what is for the people who live there to go around the corner and to explore their own daily life. I really don't want to be. Well, some images I did, they are really strong in terms of maybe shocking. I don't know. I didn't really want exactly that, but it happened to be. Like, for example, when I went to Haiti in 2010 and there was a earthquake and there was a city completely destroyed, Port-au-Prince. Well, I can't avoid to show the disaster, but still I was interested on the daily life because that's what I like to photograph.
No, I think that's really interesting. And I think it's so important, isn't it, to see a place through the eyes of the people who live there. And I was wondering actually what your process is when you arrive wherever you're meant to be taking photos, if it's commissioned, for example. What's your approach when you see something or see someone who you think looks really interesting or has an interesting story to tell? Do you approach them directly? How does that relationship evolve?
I try to talk myself, or I ask in Nairobi. I always work with a guide, with the person that is with me. Is a friend basically, and is a local. It's very important because it helps to have the trust of the people I meet. But I all the time explain very carefully what I'm doing. Talking about portrait, for example, I did this series on the street seller in Nairobi. And it's interesting because I was very attracted to them because they remind me of the city, of the town where I was born, that is in Sicily, where there were street vendors, exactly. In Nairobi, they are silent. In the city where I was born, they sing. They come with the litanies that they are still in my mind, and I wish to be a musicologist to record it, but they are in the memory of my childhood. Because I was born in the south and I grew up in the north, but I was spending time of my childhood with my grandparents in the south. So the south is in really, really my youth memory as something that stays there, and is a bit of the little world that I find here and there in my experience of life. So I was attracted to them, and then there was this article of The Economist explaining exactly about Nairobi, how complex and high in terms of in terms of economy, the amount of money produced by Islam, and I took it seriously and ironically, because of course you have to see this a gigantic amount of money parcelized for 100,000 of people and distributing in a very weird way. So I decided, why don't I give a face to this miracle and see who are these let's say economy people in Islam. Who are they? Which stories they have? I mean, I couldn't really come out with a complete and complex story. I was stopping them. I was talking, explaining. I want to explain the economy of the ghetto, and most of the case they will understand immediately. And I make a home book because it's important to show what you're doing to the people. And every time I was photographing, going to town, print a picture, try to give back the picture, and then every time say I'm doing this, and sometimes they will recognize people they knew and they were allowed me to do. But this was always through the people I work with. So it's really a combination. There's a very interesting dialogue between me, him, and them, let's say.
Yes.
And this is my approach. So definitely it's a slow approach, but I love I love it because of that. More than the picture, I can tell you sometimes.
Yes. Well, that's it, isn't it? And that's the series where you've written in a kind of sketchbook style their names and their jobs. And
the sketchbooks, the dummy books are many because I work like this in this way. Even if you see the water tanks,
yes,
which are not with the sketchbook, water tanks, they have the sketchbook, and the sketchbook became a book, a real book, the perfect copy of the sketchbook I did, and it's called Water Tanks. Exactly the same. That's a home book for school home books that I use, and I glue the pictures and write. In the case of the water tank, I write the place where I photograph. In the case of in the series of the portraits, I ask age, what do they sell, if they have children, how many children they have, and how much do they make per day, if they want to answer, because sometimes they don't want to tell you, or they say no, I don't want to be photographed, but that's part of the game. So fine, sorry, I'll let you go on. I'm not going over.
No, but it's nice to have that interaction with the people, and you probably find out a lot.
It's for me, it's even more important than the picture itself.
Exactly, and when then you look back at the sketchbook, it's like a diary of your time there, and you can probably piece it together.
Absolutely a diary, and at least it's not myself telling, oh, I did this and that, but it's different. In the case of Nairobi, I really wanted to do a step back. Now there is a lot of self-narration in the media. People, myself, I did this. No, I'm not against, but I have different approach. I really want to give as much as possible the space to the people I interact. Of course, I'm the one that does the picture. That I can't really delete myself, no. But I like to give space and explain that the picture belongs to me and belongs to them. It's after we can talk about the use of the pictures, but that's a different thing.
Yes. And I was wondering, actually, if you have to adapt according to the situation you're in. For example, I looked at your photos in Tokyo, which are all very fast paced, and it's just capturing that fleeting moment of people walking past. And in Haiti, it's more about the chaos, and the people take not a back seat, but it's more to do with their interaction with the architecture, perhaps, than the individual story of the person who's standing right in front of you.
Yeah.
because it's such a different situation. So I wonder how you adapt as a photographer.
Okay, once I find a mood and an attitude and an idea, I try to be coherent inside that project. I don't want to be coherent in every project I do because there are different moments of my life and period of my life. Tokyo, it was more emotional because I really feel isolated, not being able to talk with the people, getting lost in this place with no address and everything, but extremely fascinating, extremely sensual in a way. And I wanted to. That's really myself getting lost and see people like this. Who is this guy? What like that, being lost and surprised. And it's like when you are like a child. I knew things about Tokyo. It's not that I didn't know, but I lost the knowledge of what I knew because I think the experience was much stronger, and I wanted to react in a simple way, which was taking pictures. 80 was a different thing. 80 was there's a drama going on, and it really depends from you how deep you go in it or not, or how deep you go on the cliche about it or not. So I don't know. I don't want to say I did it right or wrong. The goal was not to photograph the poor people living in the tents, but to try to describe this situation of a city destroyed by an earthquake. We can go back to the city where I was born, where there was a very terrible earthquake at the beginning of the century, 1908. That's when my grandfather was born. And it's interesting because the stories of this destruction were going through the family memory. And I am myself, even before the assignments on 80, because 80 was an assignment from the magazine, architectural magazine Abitare. And so I went there because there was a specific goal to describe a destroyed city, not really the poor people living in the tents, but try to see how this the first emotional reaction to the destroyed space of the humans in that situation. So it's really about urban landscape, not about stories of people. So I was myself a collector of images of the city destroyed by the earthquake. I'm talking about Messina, still the city where I was born. So there was something that came out from, I was really somehow touched and surprised to be in that situation that I've been imagining so much in my childhood and even after. Now imagining that your city gets destroyed from a moment to another. And then you look around and try to understand. And in fact, the 80 has a line, which is in Port-au-Prince, there was a road that I've been, friends who have been there before, they were always talking about, which is called the big road, La Grande Rue. And I tried to work in and out this Grande Rue of the city. So let's say it can be the undertitle of the work I did. Still, I wasn't there before, but I tried to imagine somebody who get back and try to figure out what is surviving. I said that in this corner there was a bakery, and this other corner there was my hunt, and nothing there anymore.
I really like that idea of the link between memory and photography. I mean, nowadays, if we think about something like social media, everyone's just snapping away. You see people on the street taking photos of everything. And it's kind of like if people don't take photos of it, it's not recorded. It almost didn't happen. And I wondered if you have noticed a real shift with the role of social media nowadays, radical shifts in photographic practice, and also how that's impacted your own work.
Well, I experienced in a professional level that, let's say, I can say journalists or people who are in the media, they look for somehow images that can fit in Instagram, for example.
Yeah.
Which to me is an image very strong, graphic and direct, which is not bad because it helps to build a narration on your work that has a different level, different layers, but cannot be only that layer because it's like a firework. It ends immediately. You need to go deeper inside, and you need a more more complexity. So a deeper and more complex narration out of experience of can be architecture, can be anthropology, can be anything. But interesting. Now it's like there was a revolution in a certain way. I come from the analogic world, but I really love what's happening now, because photography now is much more diffused, and it's important. The problem is, it's like to have millions of readers, supposing we're talking about books, instead of 100,000. We have to improve the education of these readers, not let the bad literature going on, but try to help the good quality, because education is important. And also, especially for the younger generations, it's extremely important for them, photography, much more than for my generation. Now I'm 50, and my generation, the coolest thing to do if you were an artist, besides being an artist, you want to be a writer. Okay, now the photographer, because the photographer is like the writer for the younger generation. They are in photography. They really are symbiotic with photography. For my generation, older generation was, okay, fashion photographer, like cliche of photographer. Everybody's a photographer nowadays, and I don't think it's bad. I think it's good.
No, I agree, and it's also kind of going beyond the superficial level of photography, isn't it?
And I can also tell you another thing. In many ways, I heard many older photographers say, "Oh, it was much better with analogic, blah blah." I have to say thank you to digital. It helps to improve my work, to made it more quick to see, more diverse. I love analogic, but it's not. They're not antagonists at all. They simply are a big potentiality about the language of photography.
But how do you get the balance? Because with digital, there's so much temptation to edit, tweak, and I feel like the more you edit, the more you tweak, the more you add on a superficial layer.
The balance is not about the media photographer. The balance is about thinking of what you're doing. If you try to work on that awareness, that's my answer. Maybe sometimes it's like to be in I don't know how to explain. Like there's a buffet and you eat constantly, but try to understand when you don't need to eat necessarily. So give up on taking pictures if it really doesn't make real sense for you. Get in touch with your vision and emotion, and photograph when you really have to do it, when you really want to do it.
Yeah, I think it's so important talking about the stories. I think that's part of it, isn't it? The photography and your work as a photographer. It goes back to this idea of suspending judgment that I think I read in relation to your work, that you want people to, when they view your photographs, not necessarily to be shocked by what you see, but to be able to understand and listen to the stories that you can unravel by looking at the photograph. How do you achieve that human quality then? I suppose this goes back to what we were talking about in relation to the Nairobi project. Do you think that comes through your work as a photographer of having kind of listened to and talked to the person before, as opposed to just taking random photos as you walk along?
In Nairobi, there are different attitudes. Basically, Nairobi is a sort of representation of the complexity that I want to have in my photography. There are works like the street vendors where they are aware of what I'm doing, and I share with them a part of my work. But for example, there is another series that I photograph from inside the little bus called the Matatu, and I snap. And sometimes I even don't look what I'm photographing because I'm squeezed in the middle of the crowd. Something that, considering the actual time, it will be insane and unsafe. But that's I did it because I wanted to give that feeling of being squeezed in the middle of people that you don't know.
Exactly.
And the idea was all still to represent the city in that little corner, and part of the window, the cities appear, in a short while. It's my way to say thank you to Robert Frank's series on the bus, which Robert Frank is really my photographer in many sense. So it's my, not, I don't want to use the word homage because it's maybe, but I said, yeah, it makes sense to recall that experience of the city, and you photograph from the windows of the bus. No, it's a famous series. He did it. In the meantime, he was doing the Americans, I think, or more or less around that time.
And it's that element of surprise when you're then looking through your photographs and you think, wow, gosh, I wouldn't have been able to stand there and actually position the camera and capture that in that way, but it's just happened. It's that kind of spontaneity, which is really nice as well.
Because I photograph from my belly, basically, often because I cannot do like this. And people go, "What are you doing, Musungu, white guy?" And so I'm a thief. Okay, I admit it. I'm a thief. Sorry.
We've all done it, though.
Who is not a thief in a certain situation? The reason why I'm doing it is because I want to give the pure experience of what I'm doing. Pure will never be 100%, but let's say I want to give this idea. I think I don't steal anything out of the fact that I'm trying to represent a common experience and being in that bus and being in that situation.
Because otherwise it becomes staged, and once it's staged and they're aware that you're taking the photograph, the authenticity is gone. Yeah.
It's like the pasta when it's overcooked. Let me give you this example.
That's brilliant.
It's still pasta, but it's a glue, no?
Yeah, no, it's so true. I want to go back to talk a bit more about the relationship between people and space, so the architecture, because architecture forms the backdrop to our everyday lives. We're surrounded by buildings, we go in and out of buildings, and quite often we don't really think about the buildings at all. How do you capture that relationship between people and space or buildings? How is that important in your work?
It's extremely important because I like to associate people and the experience of the city. And I love to try to find a relationship between the two. And it's difficult to picture a city without people unless there is a lockdown. And I did it in Milan. I did a series of it. When I travel, when I come back from a travel, when I come back, even if now I was out here in the street where I live, which is the Chinese neighborhood of Milan, there's something I associate with people. I see two kids playing in the playground. That's a picture for me, even if I didn't take it because it would be really complicated nowadays. So I photograph anyway. You might forbid me to do it, but it's still there. And I can use my words to describe it. I'm still a photographer in that sense.
Yeah.
And it's extremely important. The way I choose, it depends on many things. I read before I go around. There are buildings who are important and they have a history, but I don't want to emphasize them. I want to be them beautiful and important, but exactly like when you take a walk on a city. Sometimes I wait for the right light. Sometimes I like to photograph with the wrong light, because I will be surprised. And sometimes I'm really surprised how the space reacts to a certain light or not.
Well, it's true, isn't it? For example, during lockdown, I've been going to the same beach just outside of Exeter in Devon. Every time we go, there's a different light, and the atmosphere is completely different. Looking back through the photos, you can also see that. I mean, my camera's obviously not great, but, you kind of feel that impulse. Although I've taken a photograph of the same beach over and over again, because it feels different when I return each time, I feel the need to just capture it. But, presumably it's exactly the same. It could be a building that's intact, or, for example, buildings that are crashing down for example, if we go back to Haiti, but also in Nairobi, where you have different form of architecture. People have constructed, I presume, a lot of the buildings themselves. So they're really, in that example, there's a really close connection between the people and these structures, the buildings that they have themselves built.
The situation in Nairobi is that you can't really decide what you are building, even in the iron sheet, the shelter, because there is a landowner and then you pay a rent to him. And your construction should be destroyed or or let's say unbuilt in 48 hours. So you can use concrete unless you are allowed from the government. It means you are a temporary citizen or a temporary dweller of that area. But if the landowner decides that he doesn't want you there, you have to move out in 48 hours, and he can destroy everything in 48 hours. You're not allowed. It's not your right. You are tolerated by the government. It's a different way of being citizen. So you're not a citizen from my point of view. In fact, you don't have an address. You can't open a bank account unless somebody else give you a real address,
So they don't provide any of the building materials?
No, they have to find them.
They do. So next time you go back in, were you saying you're going to go back in March to Nairobi?
Yes.
Yeah. Presumably then it will look very different to the Nairobi you remember from your previous visit.
I don't know. It really depends. Let's say the internal geography of the slum, it will change because of a fire or maybe because of the rainy season and something, like water washing everything, like a flood changing things around. And there are things that are changed. I know already. The government is putting a lot of pressure on that area because before it was a marginalized area. Now the city has grown really quickly. And the one main road, like a highway, urban highway, has been built by the Chinese and is touching one side of the ghetto. And then there is this old road that I heard has been rebuilt or it's under construction. So when the two roads are done, I think they will enter in the ghetto and pushing out people. And the pressure is already there. You understand? Because Nairobi before that was like a place where you never go. Mathare slum is a valley. It's called Mathare Valley because there's a river, and they were taking the stones to build the city before. Now, this this area is it's just a slum on the valley. So it's a very dense area. The density is very high, even higher than the more known ghetto of Nairobi, which is called Kibera.
Mm-hmm.
Mathare has 600,000 people. Kibera has, they say, 1,200,000 people. Some people say it's not possible. I don't know. That's what I've been told. Sorry.
It must be impossible to keep track as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. Are you interested in capturing the relationship between life inside the slum and then life in the city? Presumably there's a huge inequality there.
Yeah, more and more.
Yeah.
More and more, because I love to work on the contradictions. I love to work on the symbiotic between the two ways of being, because the slum is important for the city. It's really like a lung inside of a body. Talking about laborers and working people and working people who work for really little money and so on. So it's important for the economy of Nairobi.
And I saw your series on the nightclubs as well. Is that right? They go outside of the slums. They go into the city.
One of my guides is a musician, he's a rapper. And I was going around with him. He was playing here and there in the some clubs, which are not the most trendy clubs. But you have all the people I've been photographing, most of them, they are from the ghetto. It was also a way to look how fashionable are the people of the ghetto, because the way they dress is extremely important. And in every ghetto in the world, in every outskirt in the world, I'm talking about more let's say the Italian situation where the ghettos are outside. No, they are really around the center. In every case, the dress, the clothing are the way to give your own identity and your dignity. Okay, I might come from the ghetto, but I'm extremely elegant the way I wanted to be elegant, not the way you decided. I have my own elegance. I love that. That's why I use a very different language. And the way I did it is exactly, let's say, ironically quoting certain gossip magazines when they have these flashy pictures of people captured out of a disco. But in this case, I asked the people to sign the picture. Sometimes I was taking two pictures, then I didn't have enough pictures, so I said, please, I'm sorry, I cannot do both, because one picture is €1. So you can imagine how many pictures I did. I said, sorry, I'm not a rich photographer. I'll take the picture and send you to your email, or you take the picture with your iPhone or whatever you have, because they all have cell phones. And for them it was all right. They love to have this Muzungu going around taking pictures like this.
Yeah, I'd love to see the photos they take of their lives. I think that would be really interesting to see that as well, as another aspect of the photographing the community, but also from their perspective. Could be interesting.
That's what I will do probably. This next trip will be also with an Italian magazine called Perimetro. We will try to make an issue on Nairobi through this, let's say, cell phones of the people we're going to meet. Let's hope that we find enough material to be published because of the resolution. Not everybody has a last generation iPhone, but it's fine. We will find a way to do it.
Well, I wish you all the best of luck. It sounds like a really interesting project. And thank you again for taking the time to talk to me today. And it's just been really interesting hearing your perspective of those communities and spaces and how they interrelate. I will pop the link to your website in our show notes as well, so all the listeners can check out the works that we've been talking about today.
Thank you. It was a real pleasure to be interviewed by you. Grazie.